So this is the GSR head I'm going to be using for my super cheap budget build that's going on the all-wheel drive Turbo Civic. There's the control arms that I did. I detailed some of that in the other video, how I made them, but I still got to finish that video up so you guys can see what all that entailed. This head I'm going to do everything myself, except for deck it. I already had it decked by a machine shop. It's the only thing I couldn't really do and get real good and straight. But I'm going to mildly port it. I'm going to do a 3/8 valve job on it myself using just some New Way seat cutters by hand. A lot of people think that you need a Surdy or a Newen CNC machine to get a decent result. And that stuff's great and does a super accurate job. And it does it quickly, but that's the key word there is a machine shop needs a Surdy or something like that because they got to do stuff quick to be able to make a profit. If you got some sweat equity that you want to put into something, you can do decent stuff by hand if you know what you're doing. It's just going to take a little bit longer, but it'll save you some money. Obviously, the next thing I got to do here is get these old guides out and put the new guides in and ream them and hone them to fit. There are ways of doing that for pretty cheap as well, and you can get excellent results. But in this video, I'm just talking about what you need to do to check valve spring heights and set them. You need a tool to measure from the seat here. The seats are out right now, but where the seat would be, from the seat up to the bottom of the retainer. And with these overhead cam heads and everything pocketed down inside the casting here, it's difficult to do that the same way you would do on something like a small block V8 where all that's open and you can just use a telescoping gauge. But anyway, I'm going to show you the super cheap tools that I made that can do this job effectively and get that measurement for you. Sometimes you got to work with what you got. I got this reamer here in my drill press, and I'm going to ream this hole that I've already drilled center and to make a precise fit for this 2-inch plunge indicator. This is the one I messed up on. Anyway, this is going to be a tool that I'm making to check the valve stem tip height in the head up from the spring seat. And then I have another tool that will check the distance from the bottom of the retainer to the tip of the valve. And with these two measurements, I can calculate how much spring height availability I have from the seat to the bottom of the retainer. Anyway, whenever I get a little bit further along, I'll show you more. I'm done with it, and this is what we have. So, 2-inch dial indicator, 2-inch travel dial indicator. And I used a 3/4 female adapter or reducer, 3/4 plug, and this was just a like a sleeve or coupling that they had, just straight tube in the plumbing aisle. And I squared this piece and this piece up with a machinist square, so it was nice and straight, and I soldered it and just ran the bottom across a flat stone to get it nice and flat to where it sit down good. Drilled this out on the drill press and used a reamer to put it a 0374 reamer, which ends up making it a very precision fit for the indicator. And then drilled and tapped for that little thumb screw there so I can tighten it up, make sure it doesn't slip. But anyway, the idea here is what we're trying to do. This is my little representation of a cylinder head. I just have an old crappy exhaust valve here in a vise with a piece of aluminum and a retainer that's upside down, but this is being used to replicate or represent the spring seat. So what you're wanting to do, when you build your head, is you need to find, when the retainer's on there and pulled up into the locks, you need to find the distance between the spring seat and the bottom of the retainer when the valve's closed. Because what you want to do is you want to set your spring up to where when you're at max cam lift, you're not binding the spring. And you don't even want to be, there's a particular number you're normally shooting for as far as how far away from bind you want to be. You don't want to be so far away from bind that the spring, all of the spring coils aren't being utilized as much as the top and bottom coils, which can cause oscillations in the spring and wear out the coils that are being used more so than the middle springs. But you don't want to be so tight that it's putting a lot of stress on the valve train as well. Some people shoot for about as tight as, putting the spring to where at full lift it'll be about 50 thousandths away from bind. I think most spring manufacturers are probably going to be more comfortable with around 70 thousandths away. But anyway, that's up to you, your discretion and the spring manufacturer's discretion. But the purpose of this is to measure this. We're going to measure from the seat to the tip, okay? And that'll give us one bit of data that we need. And something like this helps because, when you're working on a cylinder head, pardon the mess, this is an old crappy just junk cylinder head. But, getting measuring tools down in here, like a telescoping gauge or a calipers or whatever to try to measure that is practically impossible in this style of head with everything tucked down inside, like this B series head or even worse, like a head that has a bucket cam follower down inside a bore. So anyway, so you take this guy here, and what you want to do is just have the tip hang out just a little, and then you'll zero it out on the cylinder head, and then you'll just push it right down over the try to keep it on there as good as you can. Push it right down over and land it on the seat nice and square. And we are, let's see, 1 inch 793 in this particular example. So that gives us one bit of data, 1 inch 793. So you would write that down. Now that's a make-believe number. I just set this in here. However, it doesn't in any way represent what's actually going on inside this Honda head normally. And then the next step you would want it to do, you'd want to put the keepers. You'd want your keepers holding your retainer, and you'd want to measure from the tip, because that's what we measure to. You'd want to measure from the tip to the bottom of the retainer, okay? Because we're going to subtract that measurement from our total tip height, and that's going to give us the actual measurement in between that the spring is utilizing. So I got another homemade tool for that, and I will show you how that's done here in a second. And here's the other part. So what I have here is a dial indicator on a magnetic base with a trailer hitch that I picked up at the hardware store for like $15. And I just made this little aluminum puck out of some scrap I had laying around. I was going to continue with that Honda exhaust valve like I showed on the first part, but I made this puck for a 3S GTE intake valve, so the hole was a little bit too small for that Honda retainer. But anyways, doesn't matter, same concept. So you took our first measurement was I believe 1.793, and so what you do here is you would that's kind of hard to do this with one hand, but you would assemble the valve with the keepers and retainer in here. A lot of people don't know this too. A quick tip here: whenever you assemble your locks and retainer, you want there to be, you don't want them to touch. If one end's touching and the other's not, those split locks won't let the they won't wedge into the retainer as deep as they should, and you can end up with something silly happening that you won't like. But anyway, so the idea here is you want to zero that out, okay, on the flat part of the puck here, right? And then just install this here. And there you go. So what we did, we zeroed out to the flat portion of the puck, and we're measuring up to the tip of the valve. The flat portion of the puck here is representing the top of the spring, and where it sits on the bottom of the retainer. And so we have, it bumped a little bit from earlier, but I measured this at 0.161. So 0.161, 161 thousandths of an inch. And that's given us our bottom retainer to tip thickness there, which we would then subtract from our first measurement that I showed with the other tool, and we end up with 1 inch 632, and that is our hypothetical distance that we have to play with from the seat, the spring seat, to the underside of the retainer. And then from there you would you would shim accordingly, figure out where your coil spring bind is. If you have like a Remac spring testing tool, something like that, that's awesome. It's pretty easy to figure out where bind occurs. If not, I mean, the manufacturers usually give paperwork with the spring that says what the bind is. But yeah, and just go from there and set your clearance how you want for the cams that you're using. And but anyway, hopefully that was helpful to you guys, because this is stuff that people pay good money to have machinists do for them. And you know, in my experience, most of the machinists in my area do a pretty awful job. So I end up having to redo everything myself anyway. And this is cheap and easy. You know, this is like a piece of scrap aluminum. I would hope anybody that's building a motor would already have an indicator and base. This is, you know, a cheap small trailer hitch made for, I don't even know what this is made for. It's for those like goofballs that put trailer hitches on cars, I guess. And then the other piece is just well, like you know, maybe $10-12 in fittings, a little bit of time, and that's it. And you can use this over and over and over and over for every head you do. But anyway, I'll try to post some more videos up of the budget spec stuff that I do as I go along. Hope you enjoy. Like and subscribe. I'm supposed to say that.